All right, let's see. We're going to do two more. Known mystery Matthew Lloyd is back with this question. If deploying lethal force against slow or annoying highway drivers were legal and you could only equip your car with one weapon, what would it be? Missile launchers, flamethrowers, machine guns, proximity mines, gravity bombs, etc. Well, living in LA, Matt, the main quality I'd be looking for is that it must have essentially infinite supplies of ammunition. So it'd have to be an energy weapon, and it'd have to be an energy weapon that was powered by the vehicle, because you run out of ammunition pretty quick in this town. And don't forget the Canadians. Juno Beach was the Canadians. Thanks, Simon. Didn't mean to slight them. Yeah, some kind of plasma gun would be cool. There was a game coming out. A game that came out when I was really into Traveller and playing several years where I was into this science fiction role-playing game called Traveller, which was basically Dungeons and Dragons in space. And there was a game that came out called, wasn't Car Wars. What was it called? Was it Car Wars? I want to say it was Steve Jackson Games. I'm going to check this because the fact that I can remember that it was Steve Jackson Games is astonishing to me. Car Wars. Yep, it was Car Wars. Yeah, there's a picture of it. So this was a really cool kind of a role-playing game where you basically got a chance to armor up your car and weapon up your car and use your car as a vehicle against other cars and so on. I don't want to kill anybody and I don't want to blow anybody up. I just want them to understand the simple, there's one law of the universe, right? There's even more important, it's more fundamental to the structure of space-time and everything we believe. It's more important than the laws of thermodynamics. It's more important than E equals MC squared. And it is the simple, simple, simple law that governs everything in this universe. And that law is slow traffic, keep right. I don't know why this is so hard. Slower traffic, keep right. If you're being passed on the right, you're making a mistake. I thought rather than blowing up cars, that it'd be great if there were like, demerits. Every time, you got passed on the right, you had to pay a fine. When I say I think that would be great, I think what I really mean to say is that I think it would be horrible. But many, 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 many times, I have sat in the passing lane and watched two cars in front of me that are going exactly the same speed in the same lanes for miles. And I just lose my mind over that. If we had the money, we'd invite 20 million Germans over here, teach us all how to drive, and then send them back home again, by the way, because having talked about D-Day today, I don't know if the idea of inviting 20 million Germans over to your places is such a good idea. Robert E. Lee was criticized by somebody. I want to say it might have been Sherman. It sounds like it might be something Sherman would say. He said he was a great man, but he fought for one of the worst causes that humanity's ever produced. And I think you have to say that to some degree about the German forces in World War II. I read Victor Davis Hanson's latest book called The Second World Wars. He's basically saying that it wasn't one war. You look at the air war over Europe is completely different than. And by the way, speaking of helping the Russians, the American losses in bombers over World War II in Germany was simply unimaginable. It's horrific. Your chance of coming back after 25 missions was something like 3% or something in 1943. And that actually had a pretty significant impact on the war. Anyway, I've completely forgotten what I was just talking about. I was just looking at the comment section. It just flew away. What was it? Let me go back and see if the question rings a bell. If not, Oh, that was Car Wars and all that other stuff. And driving and all the rest. I don't remember in any event. We're going to do one more and then we're going to call it a night. And that is from Merlin Wendelboe. Try this again. People keep score, I notice. The rage and the hatred just builds and builds until it becomes almost overwhelming. And then the question is answered and let the chips fall where they may. So here's the last one for the night. Merlin Wendelboe, try this again. Obama's puppet master, Valerie Jarrett, and Hillary's puppet master, Huma Abedin, are both Iranian. The Iran deal was pushed through at all costs. Meanwhile, people worry about Russian influence over Trump. Why is there so little attention being paid to the true threat? It's because it's Democrats. The answer is because Democrats, Merlin. Anytime you have a question like this and you see things that don't make any sense, that are completely inverted, the answer is because Democrats. If there was a independent news media, they would have found that this Iranian deal was treasonous. And the equivalent would be Donald Trump sending vast amounts of money to Vladimir Putin, lifting all restrictions and sanctions against Vladimir Putin, and having two of your closest advisors in the cabinet being Russians. You know, they keep trying to. We keep trying to do it. You know, this is here's the thing, Merlin. When you get into this fight and you stay in this fight, the first thing to go is your idealism. It's your sense that I simply cannot believe. I can't believe what I'm seeing. I can't believe the injustice of it. I can't believe the injustice of it. But there you go. It's there, and there's nothing we can do about it right now. Thank God for the internet, and that's why, as I said before, this YouTube and Facebook suppression is the only thing I've actually really feared since I've been in this business. We made an enormous mistake putting our communications in the hands of private companies that are run by our ideological adversaries, and whether or not those, somebody mentioned in the comments earlier, whether or not those should be considered utilities is a good question. I think they probably should be. Having just said my idealism is largely gone, my belief in justice is largely gone because of this press bias. But I remember a couple days ago, there was a pretty big deal being made out of the fact that Mark Zuckerberg swore under oath in front of Congress that, I don't know if he was under oath. I know he was in front of Congress. And he said that, Facebook users completely control their own information. Well, it turns out that's not true. And the only reason we're hearing about this story is because the liberals are lathered up, because one of Trump's political advice, was it Spectrum? One of Trump's organizations got a hold of Facebook data, and that outraged the left. The fact that Facebook's been spreading this data for a decade and suppressing conservative comment, none of that bothers them. But the fact that these Facebook leaks helped Donald Trump win is a crime that needs to be investigated. But, man, I would like to see that guy go to jail. I don't think that about many people. For example, there are some people who I despise. I despise Michael Moore. I think Michael Moore is a vile, reprehensible, horrible person. But I don't think Michael Moore should go to jail. I don't think Michael Moore deserves to be in jail. Same for Bill Maher and all the rest of these people. They don't belong in jail. They're wrong. But Zuckerberg, there's something about that guy. The arrogance, if you saw The Social Network, he's not a pleasant guy, and he's not a good guy. And I don't know how to explain this, but he also, because if you compare our bank accounts, there's some compelling evidence that I'm wrong about this, but he also doesn't strike me as a very smart guy. He's certainly a very savvy guy, and his business sense and all of those instincts are superb. And he built an enormous company out of absolutely nothing. I'm not trying to take that away from him at all. But intellectually, he doesn't strike me as a particularly bright bulb. He doesn't strike me as a terribly smart guy, and he certainly does not strike me as an educated guy. So I enjoyed I don't know, what was it, couple of hours maybe, where Zuckerberg had to squirm in the same way that we do on a daily basis because of decisions that Zuckerberg makes. But I would, when the November election is over, we're going to look back on the first 2 years of Trump's presidency, and we are going to say, what the hell was the matter with us? I mean, I could see this coming, but we're gonna look back on it and say we had 2 years where we had all three of the levers that we needed, the House, the Senate, and the presidency, in order to get things done, and we did essentially nothing with it. We did very little with it in terms of domestic policy. If we lose the House, and it looks like we're going to, at least it looks less likely than it used to seem absolutely certain. Maybe less so now, I don't know. But traditionally, the party that wins the presidency loses the House in the next off-year election. So, but if we lose the House of Representatives, what are we going to do? Well, we're just going to do what we always do. We're going to complain, We're going to complain and bitch about it, but we're not going to do anything. This is the pop culture argument again. By this time, the entire upper level staff of FBI, certainly the FBI, likely the NSA and IRS, they'd all be fired, at least fired and with investigations to follow, and restocked with people from the ranks. I would have cleaned out the FBI my first day. If I knew what Donald Trump knew about the FBI and James Comey, I would have fired him. I would have fired him as I was walking off the podium after the inauguration speech. I would have fired him right then. And if I'd known what he knows, I would have done it, and I would have gone straight to the American people about it. And I would have just simply told him, look, this. We talk about draining the swamp. Now we know. So that should have happened. Hillary Clinton should be under indictment and should be in prison by now. Certainly should be on trial. She should be in prison by now. This isn't Banana Republic witch hunt. We're not trying to dig up stuff that we can stick her with. She is the most corrupt person who's committed enormously destructive, treasonous felonies, more felonies than you can count. And the fact that she's not in jail tells everybody, her supporters and our supporters alike, it tells her supporters that she didn't do anything wrong. And it tells our supporters that that there's no rule of law anymore, which is not a good thing to have in a country that's based on the rule of law. If people give up believing in the rule of law, and I'm at that point now, by the way, then you're on the edge of a precipice. I do notice that the wall is not built. I notice that there's not pictures of a giant construction of a border wall. I don't know. I mean, if it were me and I'd gone to the trouble of getting elected and I knew what just getting elected, just that ordeal is enough to make a person just want to go away from this planet and never come back. But if I had been elected on these promises, I'd get them done. I mean, I'd get them done. And I understand that there is resistance that I'm unaware of, that there. It's easy to say I'd get them done, but that actually getting them done is tough. But now we're back to the Gordian knot kind of thing. Because if I'd been sent as president, they talk about Donald Trump being, crass and vulgar and all the rest. I'm neither crass nor vulgar. but I would be ruthless in a way that he doesn't seem to be. I would go straight to the American people, all of it. The second I knew any of it, I would just go straight to them. And I would say, looked into the CIA, the director is fired, the assistant director is fired, these 4 people have been fired. And they've been fired not because they've been fired because there's compelling evidence to me that that they have allowed politics to influence their jobs. And that's unacceptable, and they're gone. And we're launching investigations into all of these people. And if it turns out that they've committed actual crimes rather than simply moral failures, then we'll prosecute them to the full extent of the law to show people that there is a law in this country. We're gonna make sure that the law enforcement people are the ones who are going to be first subject to this idea of law again. I would have had Hillary Clinton indicted. I'd have her prosecuted and convicted. Whether or not I would pardon her at that point, I don't know. The reason I say that is because it is destructive to this country to put the candidate of half of the country in jail, and needless to say, it's destructive. I would think that the best outcome there would be prosecute her and convict her, show people that she is in fact guilty of everything that we said, and then write her a pardon. And into the pardon you write, we're not pardoning her for any remorse that she's shown or any contrition or anything like that, because she hasn't shown any. We're not pardoning her because we have doubts about her guilt. We think she should be in prison for the rest of her life. We're pardoning her out of respect for the American political system and out of respect for the 40 million people who voted for her. We believe that if that message had gotten out to those people, they would have changed their votes. But in any event, that's what I would do. And by the way, it would be it'd be much worse for her than having her locked up for life or shot or something like that, firing squad. It'd be much worse for her. Only comfort I get is that, Eric Blake said, didn't Trump promise a special prosecutor to look into Hillary's claims? As I recall, he did. And I still keep having this fantasy that I'm going to wake up one day and Jeff Sessions is going to be on TV, and he's going to basically say, I've been preparing these for 18 months now, but after 18 months of hard work and the deepest secrecy, I've now got a set of indictments for all these people, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Commute her sentence rather than pardon her. That's what I meant to say, Matt. That's right. Commute her sentence. Commute her sentence is better, because pardoning somebody basically, relieves them of the ongoing guilt. But commuting their sentence says, no, you did it and you should be in jail, and I'm not forgiving you for it. We're just going to say that you've done your jail time. But I'd book her. I'd perp walk her, and I'd get her mug shots. I'd get the mug shots especially. In fact, if I got the mug shots, that's probably all I would need, to be honest with you. Anyway. So, yeah, it's the press. It's the press. It's the press. It's the press. The press. The press. The press. The press. It's the answer to all of our problems. If the press were fair, Obama never would have been elected. Hillary Clinton never would have been elected. That means Donald Trump never would have been elected too. Obama would never have survived his first campaign if there was anything like reasonable application of truthful standards rather than covering up stories that hurt Democrats and prosecuting to the full extent of the law stories that may or may not be true about Republicans. That's the world that we have built for ourselves, is the world we abdicated from back in the 60s. When I think all of our present problems, by the way, I think you can sum up the turning point of all of our present problems, you can put it at one point, and that is early in the 60s revolution, students at Yale University took over the Yale Law Library, or the Yale Library. The Yale Library barricaded themselves in there and issued a list of demands. And Yale granted those demands if they had stormed the building and arrested those people, we may have had an entirely different outcome. I know it seems strange, but sometimes it's true. The big things grow out of little things, and with the value of hindsight, if you'd gotten the little things, you could have prevented catastrophes. You would have arrested guys like Tom Hayden and probably even David Horowitz and a few of these other people, and you would have made it needless to say, expelled them from school, face criminal prosecution, not for their politics, just for the fact that they've destroyed public property and then all the other things that they've done. And then we could have avoided, I think. Obviously, they're big undercurrents, but if we had done the little thing first, we would have been much better off. And it's the same thing with the Nazis. We wouldn't have had to have a D-Day or a D-Day remembrance if the British or the French had the courage to put a platoon of policemen on the bridge leading into the Rhine in 1935. If Hitler sent the German troops into the Rhineland, the Rhineland was demilitarized as part of the Treaty of Versailles. His generals were 100% sure that the French and the British were going to attack. Hitler was sure they wouldn't. And Hitler had given these guys orders that if there's any resistance, turn around. If they'd put a policeman on that bridge, a policeman with a little flat, hat and a little club that big, if he'd stood in the middle of that bridge and refused to turn around and they'd had to kill him in order to get past him, there wouldn't have been a World War II as we understand it. He simply would have he would have turned around. And the generals, this isn't speculation, I'm not making this up. We find out after we won the war, one nice thing about winning a war with your adversaries is you get to look at their documents, those that survive. And the German High Command, OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, basically said, if Hitler had sent troops into the Rhineland and if there had been a confrontation, we not only would have pulled our troops back immediately, we would have taken Hitler out and had a coup, and we probably would have shot him. Which returns me once again to this idea that this, all these alternate history science fiction stories where people go back in time and change something, and then you realize that the present is some kind of horrible dystopia that should never have taken place. More and more, I feel like, yeah, and we're on the dystopia timeline. Teach people some history and all of these historical problems don't develop. But if you don't teach them history, you will make the same mistake again and again and again. Sounds like there's a pithy statement in there somewhere, if I could only think of what it was. All right, it's 8 o'clock, time for me to go home. Thanks very much for joining us for this Stratosphere Lounge episode, which has a name, and I don't know what it is, but I'm going to guess it is... I'm going to have to back up. I don't care. It's 180, 187, something like that. All right, so hopefully we'll see you next week. I don't think we have anything planned. And until then, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week. And now begins the process, the part of the show where we begin to shut down the 17 or 18 buttons we have to do in order to end this tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury signifying nothing. So the first thing we have to do is we have to stop record here. Oh, let's first say goodbye to our YouTube fans. Okay, see you later there, YouTube folks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.